When you look at a map of the United States, it seems so permanent, so inévitable. The straight lines, the river boundaries, the way states fit together like puzzle pieces. We're taught that this map was drawn by big events, massive land purchases, and world-changing treaties. But that's not the whole story. Between the grand narratives of the Louisiana Purchase and the Mexican-American War, there's a secret history of hidden battlefields. These were bizarre, localized conflicts, sometimes bloody, sometimes bloodless, that had the final say on where America's borders were drawn. Let's start up in Maine. If you look at its northern tip, it juts into Canada like a jagged tooth. That bizarre shape wasn't an accident. It was the result of the Aroostook War, a Cold War fought by angry lumberjacks. Both the U.S. and British-controlled New Brunswick claimed the timber-rich Aroostook River Valley. By 1838, things got physical. American lumberjacks started harvesting valuable white pine, and British authorities started arresting them. Maine didn't wait for Washington, D.C. to act. The state raised an army of 10,000 militiamen and built forts along the border. The British responded by sending thousands of professional soldiers. For months, these two forces faced off across the frozen forests. It was a war fought more with shouting matches than musket fire. The only casualties came from falling trees and disease, but the stakes were enormous. If a single shot had been fired in anger, it could have ignited a third war between the United States and Great Britain. Finally, in 1842, the Webster-Ashburton Treaty split the territory, giving Maine the unique shape it has today, and securing vital inland waterways for America. Now let's head to the Great Lakes, for a war fought not against a foreign power, but between two American neighbors, the state of Ohio and the Michigan Territory. This was the Toledo War. Thanks to bad surveying in the 1700s, when Michigan tried to become a state, Ohio blocked the move, determined to keep Toledo. Militias were called up on both sides. Michigan's fiery young governor, Stevens T. Mason, led his troops into the Strip to arrest any Ohio officials he could find. The conflict peaked at the Battle of Phillips Corners, where Michigan militiamen fired shots over the heads of Ohio surveyors to scare them away. President Andrew Jackson had to step in. He brokered a deal. Ohio got to keep the Toledo Strip. In exchange, Michigan was given the Upper Peninsula. At the time, Michiganders were furious. They called the UPA Staro region of perpetual snow a worthless consolation prize. They had no idea that beneath that snow lay one of the world's richest deposits of copper and iron ore, which would later fuel the Industrial Revolution and make Michigan an economic powerhouse. What started as a loss turned into an incredible win. The border between American Washington Territory and British Vancouver Island was still fuzzy. The peace was shattered on June 15, 1859, over a pig. An American farmer named Lyman Cutler found a large black pig eating his potatoes. So, esce d'italiano. The problem was, the pig belonged to a British employee of the Hudson's Bay Company. When the British threatened to arrest Cutler, the American settlers called for military backup. For weeks, the two most powerful nations on Earth were on the brink of war over a potato-eating pig. The British had over 2,000 men and 5 ships with 167 cannons aimed at a small American force of less than 500. The standoff finally ended when the British admiral on the scene refused to attack. He famously declared he would not involve two great nations in a war over a squabble about a pig. You might think these kinds of disputes ended in the 19th century, but you'd be wrong. Fast forward to 1931, to the border of Texas and Oklahoma. The two states nearly came to blows over the Red River Bridge War. A new, free bridge had been built to connect the states, but a private company that owned an old toll bridge nearby didn't like the competition. They got a court order to keep the new bridge closed. Oklahoma's famously eccentric governor, Alfalfa Bill Murray, wasn't having it. He declared martial law, personally drove his car across the bridge. In a legendary act of defiance, he set up a lawn chair on the bridge, a pistol tucked into his belt, and dared the Texas Rangers to do something about it. The bizarre standoff ended when the courts finally ruled in favor of the free bridge, but it showed just how fiercely states would defend their territory, even in the modern era. And we can forget the Honey War of 1839. This one happened on the border of Iowa and Missouri. where another surveyor's mistake created a disputed 9-mile strip of land. When a Missouri tax collector tried to collect taxes from people living there, he was chased out by angry Iowans. The situation escalated when a Missouri man, trying to pay his tax bill, chopped down 3 hollow trees filled with valuable wild honey that were located in the disputed zone. That was the last straw. The Iowa and Missouri militias marched to the border, ready for a fight. The Iowans were so poorly equipped they reportedly brought farming tools and sausage grinders instead of rifles. Thankfully, no shots were fired. The Supreme Court eventually stepped in and ruled in favor of Iowa, fixing Missouri's northern border where it is today, all because of a few beehives. These hidden battlefields reveal a fascinating truth about America. The map of our country wasn't just drawn up by diplomats in fancy rooms. It was carved out by lumberjacks, farmers, and headstrong governors. Behind every straight line and jagged river border, there's a story, a standoff, a compromise, or a bizarre squabble that narrowly avoided a much larger catastrophe. These forgotten conflicts secured resources, defined the nation's reach, and created the peaceful borders we now take for granted. The next time you look at a map, remember the pig, the honey, and the lumberjacks who helped draw it. Thanks so much for watching. See you next time.